Footnote number 7. The bug in the first movement of Dvořák's New World Symphony, which we called Jednonice in one of our previous footnotes. To make it shorter, one of the first things that we learned from programming and tried to implement it into the musical theory is that you need to use names that are more unique. Therefore, in one of our previous footnotes, we decided to call all the movements in this symphony by metro stations in Prague. And in the video itself, in the main video, we decided to call themes from the first movement and from all other movements of this symphony human names, because it is much easier to identify them that way. And the entire video and this entire series is called Debugging the New World Symphony, and now it's time to finally come to the place where the bug in the first movement happens. In programming, bug is considered a misbehavior of any piece of code. If we have a bug, we need to fix it. And that's what we do in software development. But what is the bug in music? It is something different. In my opinion, it is the same thing as is the plot in a play in a theater. For example, plot of Shakespeare's Hamlet happens when Hamlet finds out about how his father has died from his own ghost. From that moment, Hamlet starts to happen. Without this plot, there would be no Hamlet. And in the first movement of the New World Symphony in Jednonice, we have a bug in the recapitulation. That is the plot. That is the plot because everything that happens further on during this symphony is based on this bug, therefore on this plot. Let's see how the exposition starts. That happens in the exposition. We first have Pietje and then Doetje, who accompanies Pietje. And with the help of Doetje, Pietje gets to its full-blown form. And what happens in the recapitulation after the development? Remember, the purpose of the recapitulation is to show whether or not themes from the exposition survived the development. Take a look. That's Pietje and Doetje, of course. They seem to happen in the same way like in the exposition. And now is the time to hear the full-blown form. But it won't happen. Take a closer look. This was not supposed to happen. This wasn't the place for Doetje, even less for Veše. This was a place for Pietje. And Pietje was sort of denied its place in this part of the recapitulation. And that's the bug. In which sense it is a bug? If we look at Pietje, Doetje and Veše as pieces of code, then we can say that first piece of code, Pietje, didn't run. It didn't run. Let's say we have an event listener in JavaScript. Let's say it is a React component. And this component has the event listener that's assigned to it in its component did mount lifecycle method before the component unmounts we need to cancel the event listener, for example, the click listener. If we don't do that, the event will stay there. It will still think that it has to run. And that's exactly what happens to Pietje. Pietje didn't run on its own place in the recapitulation, and that's why it will appear in the coda where you don't expect it. First appears Vejše. And this is how this conflict in the coda happens. It happens because of the bug that happened in the recapitulation. And that's not the end. In the second movement, we will have this beautiful Slavically and so on and so on. And then comes this glorious moment for Pietje. First time it appears in the major scale. And we might say that this was actually a place for Pietje. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But even if we accept that it was a place for Pietje, can't say that about Pietje's appearance in the third movement, just before the trio section. Listen to this part, the main theme from the third movement, which we can call Hertje, will stop here. You can see instruments go away one after another. And Pietje will suddenly appear here, first in cellos. It will get no response. It will start in violas. Again, no response, except that the section of first violins takes tail of Pietje and starts waving around like this with Pietje. But while they so pleasantly wave around with Pietje's tail, Pietje gets developed in the background. So Pietje gets developed in the background. So our bug gained some sort of a new intelligence that we didn't even know that it has. And therefore, after Hertje, Bertje and Vanesce, which are the three main themes of the third movement, run again, we get into the coda of the third movement. And now Pietje appears in French horns where nobody can ignore it anymore. And what comes next? Comes Vejše as a natural competitor of Pietje, or maybe as a counterpart. And that's all the consequence of the bug that happened in the first movement. And if I want to annoy you a little further, I will speak about what happens in the fourth movement, but there's no need. The point of this was for you to realize how the bug in a code happens and what's the difference between the bug in a software code, for example in JavaScript code, and the bug in a musical piece. Unlike the bug in a software code, which we want to fix, it is completely the opposite in a musical work. In a musical work, bug is actually what we call a plot. in a theater play. Therefore, this bug, which happens in the recapitulation of the first movement of Nironice, is actually what makes this symphony.